Hi guys, welcome to the podcast. If it sounds like I'm exhausted, I am. We just had to figure out all of our audio stuff. And thank you, Lord. And shout out to Brian Eggers for walking into the room. That's all he did. He walked into the room.
Waltzed in on the phone, pressed one button, and left.
Just was like, yeah, it's working now. Whatever. Anyways, we're here at our church.
It is our church. Woo! Lots of people wonder if we have a church because
it's so
we
true.
travel a lot, and for a while there we sort of didn't. So I mean, it's a valid question, but this is our home church. We're getting new windows installed today. If you can see these behind us, we just moved into this building in February. Legacy Nashville.
Yes.
This is one of our lead pastors, Allyson Phillips.
She's the
We opted for her over Lyle Phillips, who is often the poster child for.
I'm way more interesting.
Yeah, totally.
That's why we picked you.
Way more like enigmatic.
Yes.
The mystery.
That's
Lyle is not very
that.
mysterious. He's
No,
just,
what you see is what you get.
he is Enneagram 3, wannabe 4,
Yep.
pastor,
Wannabe.
profile to a T.
Yes. But anyways, welcome to the show. Matters over miles. I forgot to say that earlier.
Yep.
Yeah, we're glad you guys are here, but I'm really glad you're here.
Oh, I'm glad to be
I'm really
here.
glad you're here.
Your response when I texted you was like, would you like to be on our podcast show? I kind of was like, she might be like kind of busy or like maybe wouldn't love having her face on an IGTV show. And you were like, oh my gosh, that would be so much fun. I was like, wow. Okay, cool.
I just love it. I love
Totally.
you guys. That's, I wouldn't do it for everyone, but I love you.
Aw.
I love you guys so much. Yeah.
We love you.
When Whit texted me, I was like, oh, I'm so honored.
And here we are in one of the kids' rooms.
In one of the kids'
Yes.
classrooms.
And
so fitting.
I love that it looks like it looks. I really do. But this was the whole point of this season of the show. We wanted to introduce you to people
Behind
that
the
we
scenes.
do life and love with, and this is so fitting. Like, I'm so thankful that there are macaroni and cheese orange kids shirts in the background. That's
gorgeous.
exactly
They
what.
are
They're gorgeous.
orange.
And the light up glow hoops, those were
Just this whole
Yeah,
room speaks
everything.
to the behind the scenes, and
It is.
that's the point. Ministry is made up of people and things and like
Small tasks.
life. Yes,
Lots of small
lots
tasks.
of small yeses. That's so good. But yeah, so we're just so excited to have you on the show. We're not entirely sure what we're going to talk about, but
It's vague.
Whitney
It's a
has-
vague window of options.
yeah, but I think like after going to church here for the past 3 years, I love that we finally get to come to this place because we could have done this like earlier. But what I love is the relational like growth.
We all just got out of a meeting like right before this. Like, well, let's move
The
to a
real
different
real.
room. Yeah.
Yeah. So why don't you just tell us a little bit about yourself for everyone?
Yeah.
Like, all the things.
Well, obviously, my husband Lyle and I are pastors here in Nashville at Legacy Church. Sometimes when Lyle says that we've been pastoring for close to 10 years, I'm slightly offended. I'm like, have we really been doing that this long? Because it feels like we like it was a blink, when you have one of those nights of sleep where it's like, and then you wake up and you're like, I didn't sleep. That's kind of what pastoring has felt like for the last decade.
Did you guys start pastoring like right after you got married?
Oh, before we got
Before you
married.
got married.
We could do a relationship podcast at some point where I very much tell you never
Don't
do
do
that.
that.
Literally
Yes.
never do that, right? It's not even
funny.
biblical to do that. So let's have a conversation another day. But yeah, so we were married and we were full-time in ministry, but I'm from Nashville, so I've been here, a majority of my life. My parents, my dad was born and raised in Nashville. My mom moved here when she was a kid. I am like mega passionate about like family, obviously, generations. That stuff will probably come up as we chat today. But we literally live in the house that my mom grew up in, that I grew up in. So we're like, I don't know,
so
we're the
funny.
weirdest. So that's
Yes.
kind of,
The
we have 3
weirdest.
kids. Yeah.
I love it.
My kids think it's great. You know, my parents live with us, and that's how it's always going to be. You know, because I love that. So yeah, I have 3 kiddos, but I've been in Nashville the majority of my life. Been pastoring since we got married, and there's nothing I would rather do with my life than be a mom. You know, pastor. If the Lord called me to do anything else outside of, you know, full-time vocational ministry, it would be a shock of a lifetime. You know, it's never been
Yeah.
anything that I've always known that I would be in some form or capacity of ministry, maybe pastorally. I had no clue what it would look like. Definitely didn't think it would look like lead pastoring early on. Now it makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I never thought that I was fit for being a lead pastor. I am uniquely different than most all other lead pastors I've ever met in my lifetime. I make for a really great quote unquote pastor's wife, but I have a drive and a passion to be present and lead
Yes.
and
I
pastor.
really enjoy when Allie speaks on Sunday mornings because it's like so different than Lyle,
Oh,
but
yeah.
it's like very
It's
cohesive.
yes.
Like,
Yes.
It makes sense.
It
goes
does make
together.
sense.
It's like
Yes.
always like the healthy like other side.
Yes.
Which is like really cool.
Yeah, Lyle's very, one of the things that I love about Lyle is his ability to press forward. He has this insane tenacity about him.
Yes.
To literally like keep where there is no brick wall in Lyle's
Yes.
life, right? Like we will
Yes.
make it through to the other side.
Yeah.
My temperament could not be more opposite. I am the steadfast. I'm like, give me a well to dig. You know, that's like my temperament. So I'm like, I'm gonna go deep. I'm gonna mine. I love that. But we always joke, like if I was the only person leading this thing, it would be 20 of us, and you guys would definitely be there. And we would all be sitting
20 of us.
around, and we'd be in the presence of God, and we would do like nothing but be in the presence.
Yeah.
And there would be probably like no citywide transformation, but we'd be really healthy. Okay.
yes,
And we'd
we
be really
would.
connected, and Jesus would be at the very center, right? So, but thank God for Lyle because he gives me legs. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like in that way. And so we very
Yes.
much love the differences that we bring to the table. It used to be things we like fought about, and we still fight over things all the time, right? Because I approach ministry from a very different perspective than he does, but there's so much respect
Yeah.
between us that I think it creates a really fun
Yes.
church environment to be a part of.
Yes.
Because there's always a good tension, I
Yeah.
think.
Agreed.
I think it's interesting. By now, if you've seen any of these episodes, you know I'm a little bit of an Enneagram nerd, which is
I love the Enneagram.
Andrew Damasio called it the
Christian.
The Christian
Christian
horoscope,
horoscope.
which is a hysterical way to
Oh my gosh, I
define it.
I actually like burst out in laughter when he said that because it's like super accurate, kind of. It's just like whoa, but like relationships that are that go in the stress and health integrations are interesting. So like you're a 9 and Lyle is a 3. So Lyle in stress goes to 9, but Allie in health goes to 3, which like I feel like those relationships are super hard. Like initially, like you probably have like an initial very high attraction level, but then like
Absolutely.
once you get into the thick of things, it's like, oh, this is really messy.
Oh, entirely.
Because you can be like operating like in the very same space, like on the same day, which is like can be ouchy.
oh, when I
But if
say I
you
don't
learn
care
how to
about
do it-
something,
Yeah.
I mean it. If he says he doesn't care about something, I'm like, what's wrong?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And for a long time, I'd be like, why? If I check out from something, meaning like if I'm like, hands off, you just do whatever you want to do. I don't really
Yeah.
have like I don't have a care one way or another.
Yeah.
then I'm just, that's me at my like normal baseline. But if he starts doing that, I'm like, hey, what's wrong? This is suspect right here. But then it's like him operating at normal, like kind of his baseline, like, okay, let's make a plan. I have this need for significance.
Yep.
Then when I start stepping into that thing, he's like, what the heck is going on here? I thought I was the special one that was, in the significant. So it's always interesting.
I'm having a good day, Lyle. Let me live.
But you know what's so cool about marriage is like learning those things.
Yeah.
The Enneagram, I love the Enneagram, and not because I think it tells you everything about yourself. Only Jesus can do that. But I think that the Enneagram is an empathy tool, and I love tools of empathy. I want to know more about you, and sometimes it's really helpful to have a form of a box that I can wrap my head and my heart around,
like
so that I can love you better.
Into a relationship.
Yes.
Me and MP are similar. So she's a 4 and I'm a 1. So like, again, like the beginning of our friendship was very like, oh, this works. And then like when we started doing like ministry and like business kind of things together, it was like, this is maybe not going to work. But now that like when you kind of like get used to like how those cycles go, then it's very much just like, oh, like I know this thing about you.
The checkout thing is great. Like she's like, forget it. We're not doing this. I'm like, yeah, let's talk about that one.
Yeah.
But if I'm done, I'm like, no, you just let me be depressed for at least 30
Just let
minutes.
me be in my feelings
You
for
gotta
like
let me be
22
there.
minutes, and then I'll be
I'm
fine.
like, well, we're good to go.
And then
We're good
she's
to go.
like, okay, let's go to lunch. I'm like,
You're like, I thought we
do
were
that.
depressed 10 minutes ago. And you're like, I was.
You're right.
I
fine.
totally
We're good.
was very depressed 10 minutes ago. Yep. Kind of cool.
Well, I think something that I was really moved by probably last year when you spoke on it was emotions inside of church. So I think this is kind
At
of cool.
College, right? Legacy College?
Yeah. I like it was a moment of feeling super seen and offended all at the same time. It was perfect. Just because there's such a stipulation initially, I mean, especially within the field of ministry and being women and being in a lot of different churches we've played out where there aren't a lot of women that are on staff. And I'm really not trying to make it a women-men thing. It was just what I loved about the emotional side of it is because you and Lyle co-lead a church, that when you stepped on stage and you were talking about that, I knew hand in hand that that was something that you both agreed with. And it was something that such powerful amounts of words, but done with such kindness. And I felt safe to be able to talk about emotions when emotions for me have been so crippling in any type of field I'm in, because it's something I initially show and then people don't know what to do with it. So then they're like, you need to button that up because I can't handle it right now. And I'm like, well, that's great, but you basically said you can't handle me.
handle
So
it.
Exactly.
what do we do with that? Is there any like nuggets from that? Like, I feel, can we talk about that a little
Yeah,
bit?
yeah.
Totally.
Because I really feel
Good segue.
whatever you said with emotions within church ministry, particularly, that everyone's got them, but there are certain ways that people have said don't have them.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is like a passion point for me because I think something that destroys the life of a believer is the inability to recognize what's happening on the inside of them. And I've seen it happen so often. Most times when I see a leader who has like a moral failure, there's about 10 years worth of ignoring what's happening on the inside of you that leads to that place of absolute like falling apart.
Yes.
And I'm like, well, what is that thing, right? Like, what is that? And, I love what you said, MP. If you ignore someone's emotions, then it's as if you're ignoring the person. And the reason is because if you could wake up this morning, if you woke up this morning, the one thing you didn't do was choose every single emotion that you're going to have today. Like we got out of a meeting just now. There were emotions, there was conversations, there was tension, there was joy, right? You don't wake up and say, okay, these are all the emotions that I'm going to feel in the context of this conversation or this interaction with a friend or stuff that's happening with, the mic setup, right? that'd be cool if we could, because we'd all probably wake up and just say, I'm going to feel the joy of the Lord today. And that's what I'm going to feel. But unfortunately, or fortunately, that's not how we're wired, right? Emotions happen to us. And this is like a very weird thing for people to understand. Emotions happen to you. You don't get to choose what emotion comes up when something happens. But as a born again believer, we get to have the understanding that our emotions don't actually control us. So we might have an emotion, but how we respond to that emotion after we have it is what we do have control of. And I think in church, what I've watched the majority of my life is people say, I'm going to stuff my emotions because I have control over my emotions.
Right.
Wow.
But unfortunately, that just isn't
Self-control.
real. Yeah, it's like, hey, that's not
a fruit of the spirit.
Right.
To stuff your feels.
right. And I don't know
Ooh.
where that came
Yeah.
in, because that's not even like you don't even see that in the life of Jesus. There was no emotional stuffing, but there was emotional moments that were processed in a healthy way.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, looking at like, if there's one thing that the church could do better over the next 5 years that would pay off for the next 50, it would be teaching people how to properly deal with the weighty emotions that come up as a result of living life in our current context.
Yes.
And I think we would set our kids up for a ton of success. We would set our relationships up for a ton of success. But those tools are hard to come by in a ministry setting because they've never really been available to us.
I think it's like not too dissimilar to, I mean, this is somewhat controversial too, but we're, body, soul, spirit, like 3 parts, triune, like God is. And like every part of that is something that has to be positioned for like stewardship and maintenance. So like you're saying, like emotions happen to you, which, I think a lot of people would probably be like, that's not the truth.
Right, because they just had an emotion when I said that and they couldn't control it.
Right.
You know what I mean? Right. Like you don't pick that.
This is why this message was semi-offensive to me. I was like, that's not, maybe.
But like you have a body that like you didn't get to choose like the type of body you were going to have. You just have it. But you can position your body to be well maintained.
You can maximize
to operate
it.
like at maximum capacity.
Exactly.
Like if you only eat cheeseburgers every day of your life.
Exactly.
And candy bars, like
You
if
might
you
feel
have
like a
if
cheeseburger.
you have some kind of a sickness or something that happens, you're not going to be well positioned to be able to
Exactly.
recover from that or to be able to handle that properly.
Exactly.
And the same thing is with emotions. Like if you learn how to navigate your emotions and how to like deal with what you have been given, then you're wiring yourself to be able to like function at a like very high capacity of emotional intelligence.
Exactly.
Just as you would physical health. Like it's like
Exactly. And I think what most people don't understand is how severely important it is, because we think, emotions we just push them aside and they just, they disappear, but that doesn't actually happen. So like the former Surgeon General said, loneliness is an epidemic, right? Loneliness is more deadly. I did not say this. This is years of proven study. Former Surgeon General says loneliness kills more people than smoking a pack of cigarettes every day.
Yep.
Why? Because your body keeps score. Your body does not, there's no ability for you to have a strong emotion and it just bounce outside of your body, right?
on.
Your body holds on to those things, holds on to those traumas until you're ready to process them, right? So like it's the gift, right? It's a gift that your body can hold them until you're ready to process through them. And that's why I love Jesus, because forgiveness is like the ultimate trump card to make way and make space for you to process traumatic emotional events. Without Jesus, there is no space. So there's no way to process those things if forgiveness isn't an avenue to do that thing. And so I think for me, I'm like, our bodies are absolutely miraculous.
Yeah.
Our ability to process things long after they happen and the gift that God gives us to do that is so
Yep.
amazing. Otherwise, we would be disassociated from our real life, right? Like if we just had an emotion and it bounced out the next day, how do you create a memory? How do you create anything that's good in your life?
Yep.
But the Lord makes space for the hard and the good to coexist so that you can become a whole and round person.
Speaking my language, Allie.
But we don't talk, it's not a very people are just now coming to understand the connection that emotions are between the body and the spirit. Like
Yes.
sometimes it's like a little bridge between the two.
Yes.
And your body responds
Yep.
when you have an emotion. And so I think if people like understood that, it's actually like it's as important as eating healthy to process your emotions
Yeah.
for the longevity of your life.
Yes.
Yep.
And most people have never been told that. So they're like, oh, I just learned from my parents that we
Sure.
don't talk
Yeah.
about emotions because it's there's no space for that here.
Yeah.
Why? There's several reasons
Sure.
for that. But they just learn. It's learned behavior. Oh, I don't talk about my emotions, and therefore they must just disappear and go somewhere. However, when I enter into a similar situation, I deal with this with people who've been hurt in church all the time, right? So they've been hurt in church. They don't process the hurt and aren't able to leave it with that experience. They
Yep.
bring it into every other experience after that.
Yes.
If I treated me looking for a spouse based on, and a lot of people do this, based on every bad relationship experience that I had previous to it, then I never
Yeah.
would have gotten married,
Yep.
right? Because if I'm like,
Yes.
oh, like I had a bad
It's
experience
never
with
gonna
that.
be good.
And people do that. They carry that one experience into every other area of their life,
Yeah.
and it actually becomes a roadblock for their future, right?
Yes.
So it happens in church all the time, but for some reason as leaders, we're like, we crack the Bible open and we read it through a non-emotional lens.
Yeah.
But like it's so very emotional, which is why
It
it
was
can be
written by a
so
bunch
very
of people in the
yes,
Middle East.
very weird. We're like,
They're
oh,
like
what are
very
these emotions?
emotional people.
Beautifully,
Yes.
beautifully emotive.
Yes.
Like certain hand signals, certain things you do with your shoe, like
Yes.
when you're
Everything
upset
means something.
or in
Yes.
transaction. Yeah. Also, if you hear things in the background, I'm having an emotional response to the things in the background. I'm literally getting like stressed out because I'm like
Tell me.
thinking, oh, okay.
They're gonna bust in a
It's
window
gonna
right
be-
there.
Honestly, I thought about that. I was like, this is gonna be great.
might
It's gonna be
happen.
like a
It's gonna be
full
great.
movie.
It's
I'm
gonna
gonna
be a great
capture that. But yes, they're putting in windows. But
It's
I kind
fine
of
because we're very thankful that they're finally putting the windows in.
I love that. See, but that's another thing. Like I'm processing through the whole thing, but then I have a memory that I know that I'm actually sitting in the middle of construction going on, which is so
It's kind of weird.
perfect
It's crazy.
for life in
Feels good.
general.
It's a
man.
good parallel.
Okay, so in all of that, in the processing side of it, what would you say, like, what are some things that you have used, sweet God, what are some things that you have used to like process emotions in to be able to get to that place where it's not just, oh, this is the
Right.
definition for everything else.
Totally. So I would say one, I was gifted with finding like probably one of the most I don't know, well-able counselors on planet Earth.
Okay.
I adore Lyle and I's marriage counselor. He's like our friend Andrew Damasio. Yes, they're literally
I
taking
cannot.
windows out. So
amazing.
our friend Andrew Damasio literally has his therapist tattooed on him. And I looked at Lyle when he said that. I'm like, we should get
do
Gwen
it.
and
So
Phyllis.
sweet.
Why? Because it's been so helpful for us to learn tools. The only way that you get better at anything is to get the right tools to get better
Yeah.
at the thing. And so I think there's like a passion inside of Lyle and I to like kind of erase that weird stigma surrounding counseling and inner healing and therapy and all the things that are so necessary. This is why you would be at the church that I would be in charge of. They literally might come through that window.
All right.
There it is. So
That's why, because there's that. Never mind.
There's
It's
a-
fine.
oh yeah, there's a little
come
there's a
on.
little peek over there. But I think it's going to actually go and get the tools from
Yeah.
whatever place is great for you.
Yeah.
I have my counselor just wrote a book, and I'll give a plug for his book. It's called The Connection Codes by Dr. Glenn Hill, and it's literally a toolbox to learn how to process your emotions. So every human, we talk about it often. Every human is made up of 8 core emotions. and we use those words when we're processing what happens inside of us. So like right now, you're probably having
I'm fine.
one of those 8 core emotions.
That's called dissociating.
Oh, dissociate. I'm fine, right? There's probably fear or hurt or whatever is coming up because we're like, somebody's going to bust through the wall right now. But having the language is so important, right? Because until you have the language, then you don't actually have the ability to process the emotion because most people just don't have the words for it.
The opposite, I read a book, you may have read it because you alluded to the title of it before, The Body Keeps the Score.
Yes.
Bessel van der Kolk, he's like my sensei. He says in that book that the opposite of being traumatized is being able to communicate.
Whoa.
Which is
Exactly.
makes it seems like almost like way too simple, but like when you have been like in fear, like an intense terror, or you've experienced like an accelerated version of cortisol and whatever kind of like endorphins and hormones and things like run through your body to make you feel emotions that you feel. It is a scientific process. Then it's like you don't know what's going on inside of you, and the way that we process that is often just like a reaction.
Exactly.
It's not really like I'm going to respond to this. And if you can respond to it and actually assess like how you're responding, then that like actually regulates this. It kind of makes it more like this. So when you're remembering something or able to turn a bad situation into like a testimony, that is healthily processing through like your body's experience and your mind's experience and your emotive experience.
Exactly, because that's actually self-control, the ability to respond versus react.
Rather than
But
just
until because we all do that thing. Anger is a culturally appropriate emotion. Okay, so for us as Americans, and maybe in other cultures it's different. Anger is actually an appropriate. People will listen to anger, or they'll see it and they'll respond to it.
Yeah.
But anger is usually a secondary emotion, right? So it's not actually usually the first emotion that you're feeling. So usually if I'm feeling anger, I tend to struggle with loneliness. Loneliness is a feeling that I feel very often. And anger will do a really good job covering up my loneliness, right? So I'll be like angry that I didn't get invited into a situation. But the reality is I felt lonely because I was at home with the kids by myself for 12 hours that day, or whatever that feeling is. And instead of learning how to respond from being able to communicate and respond and say, hey, right now I'm actually just feeling lonely. And it's not that I have to push it aside, but I can actually give it a name and say, I see you. And that matters to me. And now when Lyle gets home, instead of just blowing up at him and yelling at him for not inviting me to something or making me feel left out of something, I get to say, hey, I felt really lonely today when this happened. And it becomes an invitation to a dialogue and a connection versus a confirmed experience that, I'm just left out of everything, or I'm just rejected, or I'm just all of these things that we feel, and anger's at the surface.
Yes.
And we're just explosive.
And to clarify, anger is a secondary emotion because it gives you a justification for why you are actually feeling what you're feeling. So if you're angry, it's like, well, nobody wants to be around me when I'm angry, so that's why I'm alone.
Exactly.
Whoa.
Oh, I'm angry and like I don't want to talk to you about this, and so that's why I'm pushing everyone away. And it's kind of like it puts a perimeter around you so that you don't actually get all the way through it to the thing that is occurring underneath.
I can probably only count on my hand like a couple times that I've actually singularly been angry.
Oh, yeah. Because it can be a primary emotion.
Yes.
I know that you guys have had conversations on this podcast, people who have worked with, friends in sex trafficking, right? You see an injustice.
Yes.
That's usually primary anger, right? When you see someone being taken advantage of and you feel anger, right? That's like primary. That's like, hey, that's for real. It's why Jesus could feel anger and it be him not sin in it, right? Because it's not that emotions are sinful in nature, they just are. It's what we do with them that matters the most.
Come on.
And I think that for us looking through the life of Jesus, so many of us, I used to read that scripture and feel so confused. How can he be angry and not sin? Because I always labeled I would call them negative emotions as being sinful, and like the positive ones like joy and happiness and yay, celebration as being like holy and like, so I didn't know how to be connected with God. I was so confused when I would read the Psalms and see David pour his heart out before the Lord in sadness and anguish, and God say, that is a man after my own heart. I'm like, how are you even connected? He's like, he's sinning, right? He's sinning in his his myriad of emotions. But I think that's where now I see prophetically, like the church is coming into a new season because I see people like us leading the way saying, hey, actually there is a better way to do this thing. And if we do this well, then some of these hot topic issues and tensions and disagreements and disconnections can actually be dialogued through because we're going to be honest about what's happening on the inside of us when they come to the surface, versus as Christians saying, hey, this has to become a black and white, I'm right, you're wrong issue. We can get so much better at saying, I don't see things that way, but I'm very curious about why you feel this way, and I care about it because it's not wrong.
Well, and also like the church as a whole spends so much time doing like repairing the damages of like emotional bad stewardship. So like on a bigger contextual level of the American church, say, we're always like dealing with the repercussions of the humongous windfall of someone having an affair or being addicted to something, or like having all these big things that come out, and it's like, how could this possibly happen? And it's like, well, we don't like teach anyone how to handle their feelings. So
exactly,
when you live a whole life in front of thousands and thousands of people with feelings that you never were given the tools to be able to dialogue,
exactly,
then the coping strategies become like very minimal, like, and that's just what happens. So if we would just do the work from the beginning, that's why I love like hanging out with kids, because it's like
they cannot sugarcoat.
You can
that
just
feeling.
literally have such a point blank conversation about feelings.
Oh yes,
with kids, and it's like the way that they talk about it informs me. Like that's how you should be talking about it.
Exactly.
It doesn't need to be like so categorical and like I'm either all this or all that.
Yeah.
It's like you can be two seemingly opposing things at once, because like God bless us, we go through many experiences and have many interactions like in an hour. So like you can be sad and happy.
Yes.
Like at the same time, because there's like many things circulating in here at once. Like
it's so true.
Well, you describing like different things that you use to kind of process, something that Whitney and I have done with kids that we know, like our friends that have kids, we play the game, what color do you feel?
Yes.
And it's been really amazing. Like if anybody has ever seen the movie Inside Out, that spoiler alert, but at the end, there's these memories that she's overwhelmed by because she's moved to a new city, and they have this really amazing happy memory associated with them. So they're yellow. They're the joy emotion. But then as she realizes and she processes being away from home, these core memories turn blue.
Yes.
And what's really amazing is that the characters of joy and sadness in the movie, you realize that sadness is just being herself the whole time, and joy is trying to overcompensate for it. Mm-hmm. And as joy is doing that, what happens is every single emotion that this little girl has eventually turns sad, because you cannot overcome the reality of what's actually happening.
Exactly.
So what we've been able to do, one of our friends, her little girl, I asked her after school one day, I was like, what color are you feeling? She's like, yellow. I was like, cool. She's like, and blue. And I was like, tell me about it. What does that mean? She's like, well, I'm yellow because I'm really happy. There were a lot of fun things that happened today, but I'm also blue because I got in trouble. I was like, well, why'd you get in trouble? She's like, I was talking too much in class. And so my teacher told me to be quiet. She's like, but then I felt yellow afterwards because I got to go to recess and I was fine. We have started doing this with our friends.
With adults.
And
it's
and
so
here's
helpful.
Here's the coolest part, where this little girl had yellow, blue, happy, sad emotions. We've been able to have color codes with our friends, and everybody's color system is different. My color system, like when I'm sad, I have like a gradient of color, but I like dig living in sadness. Like I'm fine with it. Like it
Totally.
doesn't offend me. I'm fine living kind of
Totally.
swirling in the melancholy where other people are like, this is the worst thing ever. Like I would say that my most depressed state is just flat out black. Like the world shut down. There's no color in it because of the gradient of emotion I have. I have this large spectrum of color. So I'm like, oh yeah, if it's black, we're in a bad state because it basically means there's no light in anything and I can't see the color. Where Wit, her color's like a little bit more. There's this one and there's this one.
color-
Like, which one would your happy color be? What's your happy color?
Electric blue.
Yeah,
I believe that.
electric blue. Right?
It's like the color blue that like Toyotas come in.
Yes.
Like if you see like a new Toyota
Yeah,
truck
like the
and it's
Yaris.
blue,
Can you imagine? I know exactly what
it's
color.
like
Okay.
when I see like a blue truck, I'm like happy blue.
Really?
Yep.
So blue, sad would for this little girl, blue, sad, but for Whitney. And the cool thing is that there is a gradient within. There's a reasoning behind why that color is what it is
Yes.
too. So there's like
There's happy memories attached to colors. and there's all
it's
sorts
so
of things.
cool is it gives it language for people.
Which
like,
is why it's like not good enough to just be like I'm sad. Like the communication of which I imagine like your connection codes thing is similar. It's like I'm reading a book called How Emotions Were Made right now, which is like very new science on like the neurobiology of emotional whatever. I'm a nerd, I know. But it's like if you say you're sad and I say I'm sad and she says she's sad, it's all three going to be different things.
Absolutely.
And like the whole idea of like facial recognition being like ingrained in our humanity and stuff like that is not actually like super true. It's they're learned behaviors. So even like in Christian subculture, there's learned behaviors of like these emotions are negative, so they are sinful. So I can't sin because then Jesus won't like me. So I will never be angry.
whoa,
And like
come on,
Can you
it's-
imagine
it's-
never giving yourself permission to be angry or passionate about something?
I can.
Yeah.
I can imagine that.
Yes.
Like
'Cause
first
the shame you
22
feel.
years of my life.
Well, Christians that I have experienced this is not across the board, but shame is one of the largest. We will, as humans, but Christians even more so, we will do anything to avoid feeling shame.
Yep.
Literally anything.
Yes.
We'll do anything to not feel shame.
Yes.
And that's very interesting.
Anger, secondary emotion.
Exactly. So we'll say, hey, let's say somebody, so for me, if I was a little kid and I got in trouble in class, I would not feel sadness. I would feel shame. So, and I was able to articulate shame from a very young age because that's something that like touches me very deeply.
Wow.
But as you get older, to avoid that feeling of shame, anger loves to come in and be a really good mask for shame. So what I'll hear around like a pastoral conversation is, especially like let's say between a couple, is very much at play, right? So
Yeah.
anger actually becomes their method of communication because shame is actually somewhere buried deep in their connection.
Come on.
And they'll argue and it'll be your fault and you'll do this and it's anger and I feel so ragey about who knows what. When the reality is, hey, I actually just feel shame because of any number of things. I really dropped the ball. You were actually at home. This happens all the time. You were actually at home with the kids for 12 hours today. That actually sometimes hits Lyle with shame. Like you actually feel shame about that sometimes. Like, man, it's like a lot.
Yeah.
And then I miss the kids and I feel like I'm missing out on some things. But if you're not careful, when I say I feel lonely, his shame will get touched and anger will pop up. Because my loneliness touched shame in his life. He's
Yeah.
like,
He
I
feels
already
bad
feel
about
bad
it.
about
Yes.
this. So instead of there being like you're lonely? Man, that really sucks. It's
my fault.
because I actually feel shame about this,
Yeah.
right? So this happens
Yeah.
in relationships all the time. So how connection codes, we talk about it. The gradient is we go from 0 to 40 feet. Okay, so 40 feet, a 40 feet fall is basically the height at which someone can fall and survive. Barely survive. So we've not really found an incident where someone falls over 40 feet and they live. So we talk about it in that
Yeah.
sense. So someone's like, so if I say I feel lonely, I'm like, hey, it's not 40 feet of loneliness. It's about 10 feet of loneliness.
Ooh.
Nice.
You know, so
love
that's
that.
kind of how far off the ground with loneliness I'm feeling right now. So that way, as the shame pops up, there actually can be more of a dialogue. Because what
It's
you
not
always
like
assume is it's like
The
So
worst
through the
thing.
roof of
Sure.
everything.
Yes.
But those are the tools that are so necessary. And I think that Lyle and I feel a ton of passion that as we're pursuing an incredibly presence-driven culture, we also have to give tools so that people
Yep.
can be great parents, great spouses, great, you know, I dream of a divorce-free zone. That's like my passion. I want to see families go the long haul. But I can pray a lot of really great prayers and give zero great tools, and
Yo,
it's just
come
not
on.
going to make it the
Yeah.
reality. And so for us, I just think that it's not like a new revelation of God. I think the revelation's always been plain.
Yeah.
But I think it's a new permission that we've been given as believers to explore what
Sure.
it looks like to be passionately connected to the Father. And until we unlock that like emotional inside of people,
Yes.
they're going to be confused why we love to do devotionals in the morning
Right.
or why we like to spend hours in the prayer room or why we lift our hands in worship. I'm like, but there's passion here. There's joy here. There's sadness is available to be here. I'm allowed to be that here, and God's able to meet me in that place. And I think that's like the holistic picture that the Lord's inviting us into is, hey, we want to be authentically presence driven. So Jesus at the center, but we want our relationship with him to be real too, you know, but until you unlock that thing in people, and it's like, hey, you gotta let him see this part of you. He already sees it anyways.
Sure.
But there's a difference between, I know when Lyle's angry, but there's a difference between me knowing he's angry and him letting me know he's angry.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like there's a different relational connotation to that.
Yep.
Hey, I actually feel safe enough to let you know how I'm feeling today. There's nothing that's better for me than my kids coming to me and saying, I felt so mad when you did that. I feel so much joy, you know. That stuff, that's so great for me because it signals that they trust me with the most precious parts of them.
Yes.
And I think that's how the Lord feels when
Yeah.
we behave in that way.
That's
so
good.
I'm with you, Wade.
That's
It's
good,
I'm
that's
a
good.
nerd on this kind of stuff, but I think I really
need
do
to
think
read
it's
this book that I'm
important.
reading.
I need to.
But it all leads unto people.
Yes.
Yeah.
And God made people on purpose.
Yes.
Go back to the garden. He made them on purpose.
Yes.
He breathed life into them on purpose. Imago Dei, image of God. We are the bearers of his image. Everything was done with intentionality. So if we are reflections of the Lord, then any emotion that you have started with him
Absolutely.
first. So to be able to have this language unto healing,
Yes.
so that you can get to that point where you're like, oh my gosh, I didn't read my Bible. I feel so much shame to this.
Yes.
Oh my gosh, I didn't do the thing that I felt was the most like Christian based moment to make me feel like I'm living it out. It's like, there's so many things behind the scenes that if there is no healing unto it, then yes, your perspective on God and your relationship, it's going to be stunted, just like any other relationship would be when you don't have a way to translate what's going on inside of you. And like, I would say that people would look at any of us three and say, wow, they're really passionate people for the Lord. Like, well, I've also been pretty passionate about dealing with what has been underneath the surface that has not been dealt with.
What is your
Totally.
sonotherapy people say? Mental health may not be your fault, but it's your
Oh,
responsibility.
absolutely. You can't let someone else do. I always say, like, you can't let someone else's mismanagement of your heart become your legacy, right? Like,
Yep.
you can't let it happens, right?
Oh,
That sucks.
yes.
Praise God that we have the ability to process
Yep.
bad things that happen to us. Praise God, we have the cross and forgiveness and all of these things available to us because those things aren't our fault all
Yeah.
the time.
Yeah.
You know, that person violating your boundaries was not your
Yes.
fault when you were 3 years old,
Come on.
5-year-old, 6-year-old,
Yes.
10-year-old, right?
Yes.
There are all sorts of things that happen to us in life, but how do we move forward and not let that become the legacy for our generation moving forward?
And praise God for the people that have been the ones that have done the things to the other people.
Yeah.
Because there is so much more backstory into even that before you even understand it. I
Yep.
literally have blackout years of being addicted to porn. Blackout years. When I was like 8, 9, 10, and realizing certain things that, like having blips of like playing with toys and
Yes.
demonstrating things
Yes.
out, or being like, hey, brother, sister,
Yes.
come do this with me.
Yes.
And it's like, oh my gosh. But not being able to have any understanding or language or processing. And then now God's doing it with me now. And it's hard, but the amount of freedom from shame that I have, it has moved me into an arena in my life where I'm looking at and going, that is not the definition of my heart, because my emotion went all the way through, not around the
Yes.
situation, all the way through, so that there was healing through the valley. And I'm on the
Exactly.
other side and I'm going, oh, cool. God loves me. Then in the middle, the same, backwards, forwards, which way, whatever way. And now when I actually feel some of those things rise up in me again, I can go, hey, Baba, hey, Papa, can you help me with
Yep.
this? Because it's starting to feel like that. And now that I understand what that used to feel like
Yes.
in this moment, we can go through it. And the time between
Yes.
recognizing
It gets shorter. Mm-hmm.
It gets shorter.
It gets shorter.
Yes.
That's the gift, right? The gift is
Yes.
being able to recognize, and the distance shortens.
Yeah.
So like the distance between when Wit hurts my feelings and when I tell her, oh, that actually kind of hurt my feelings. The closeness of that conversation is the closeness of our relationship. That determines how connected we are.
Wow.
You know, so how short that I feel permission to say that, and that's been stewarded in our relationship,
Yep.
means that's so wonderful, right? So now that once you get tools, it takes time to
Yeah.
close that gap
Yeah,
and
yeah,
close
yeah.
that distance. But it's just
And
like starting.
consistency.
Yeah, it's just like starting somewhere.
Yep. So I have like a thing that's like in the pit of my stomach where it's like, I feel like it's the poke the bear moment of this.
All right, do it, because you got about 10 minutes. So let's do this thing.
That's why I just looked at Allie's phone. I was like, do we have time?
Oh, yeah, we got
I think
time.
we're good.
So
Um,
in what we've been doing is every single time there's like this deep stirring
It
in
kind
our
of
bellies.
like you like
Oh
kind of like
dear.
get to like having the conversation
have
and
this,
it's like,
and then
what's
you,
the thing that like we should say that
wanted
nobody
it?
says?
Oh no.
oh no.
I'm here for it though.
Okay, but like there's a stigma surrounding this, which is why it's like, well, why don't we just talk about it? I was writing a research paper the other day, and one of the
Just for fun.
no, I'm in school.
Oh my gosh, why did I not know this?
She's getting her master's.
Okay, I did know this.
Okay. I was like, I thought you. Yeah, we've
I
been
knew
here.
this. Sorry, podcast.
We're very close.
Super
I forget that I'm in school sometimes.
Yeah,
It's okay.
adulting.
Anyway, one of the things that I read was that our country, I mean, which I think everybody knows, that our country is the highest medicated country in all of the world. Antidepressants and anti-anxiety medications, people over the age of 18, 15% of them at this current moment have taken antidepressants in the last 30 days. As the decade of age gets higher, it goes up 10%.
Per
so by the
decade.
time you get to 60 years old, it's like 50%. Like literally 50%. So
Wow.
like literally half of the people at Legacy
Right.
are on antidepressants and anti-anxiety meds.
Yep.
So when we have conversations about emotions and sadness and dealing with all of these things, then what I feel like happens is that oftentimes those people get the added emotion of shame
Totally.
because that's how they're processing. Like, oh, well, if all these people knew that I was on antidepressants,
yeah.
then
Wow.
it would be like super awful and they wouldn't respect me anymore and they would think that I don't know how to manage my emotions and whatever. And it's like, nobody that's on antidepressants wants to be on them. Like, who wakes up one day and is like, you know what? I want to be on a pill for the rest of my life.
Yep.
Not me.
Yep.
Like, that's not, it's a byproduct of like negative situations that you would
Exactly.
ever need to be on medication for any reason. So, like, I just want to like kind of like cut through the barrier on that and say, if you're on these, many of my close friends are, like my family members, like there's lots of
Wait, when I was younger, I used to take all the like Sammy balancing pills,
balancing
like the
stuff.
natural
Yeah,
stuff,
yeah,
so
yeah.
that I
Yeah.
could like
yeah,
manage
totally
my
remember
crazy.
that. And like
Yeah,
I
big
Personal crazy,
feelings.
not anybody
Big
else. No
feelings.
shame, my crazy. We're
just
fine.
like crazy.
Big feelings.
But like I just want to say that like those stigmas surrounding that, like I don't want to say like, oh yeah, it's totally great that you're on anti-anxiety medicine. You should just stay on it for the rest of your life. And I also don't want to say like that's not godly. Like you should not need that. You should be able to manage your emotions and take care of how you feel and all of these things without any of that. Like there is a way to wholeness like in these conversations for whoever is out there, that like this conversation does not need to add shame to wherever you are at in your journey, like surrounding these topics, because you're not alone.
Yeah.
The statistics are very obvious. And I mean, 18 and older, like 15%. So we're talking about like kids.
Right.
Yes.
Like, and we're not even talking about like
No.
legal kids. And there's tons of children that are on
Jesus.
Right.
things like that too. So it's
Right.
just a matter of like, as you like, probably there are like emotions that are stuck like in this process. And as you are able to like not feel shame, like don't feel shame. Like, please, like if you're feeling shame right now, like go to the Lord and talk to Jesus about the shame that you feel about the fact that you're on antidepressants.
Right.
You know, because like
Right.
the enemy would want for you to feel shamed over what is like a culturally normative process by which to handle
Yeah.
your emotional landscape. And
Right.
it just like does not need to be like another shame inducing
Right.
factor. Like the body of Christ is supposed to be able to work through all of this content together, and communicating, as we have said earlier, is the antidote to trauma. So if nobody's ever told you that you don't have to feel like a crazy person for taking Xannies, well, here I am. You don't have to feel like a crazy person, and you also don't have to feel like God is like disappointed in you, because that's not actually going to help you.
No.
You can't shame your way out of
Ooh.
or into like anything besides for more shame, really.
Oh yeah.
Shame
and
just like
that's real.
results in more shame.
Yeah, I have always been I never had any strange stigma surrounding any sorts of antidepressants, anti-anxiety medicines. And I think when I got older and I saw like, oh, they're my friends that are walking through seasons of just depression or, you know, whatever they were going through, that sense of hiding or that sense of, I'm like, oh, this makes things so much worse.
Yeah.
Like if you just knew how loved you already were, that would be really helpful. But I think that there's like this invitation, right? There's tension. Nobody would get off of their, diabetes medicine if they were trying to immediately, as they're going through a process of healing their body, right? The goal might be, hey, this is helping me. This is helping me live right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I have to go before the Lord and say, hey, is this something that you want me to live with for forever?
Yeah.
Because if not, then let's start a journey
Yep.
towards what life would look like on the other
Right.
side of this. That journey might take 2 years, 3 years, 5 years, 10 years. I don't know. But as long as your heart is surrendered and submitted to the Lord in that process, then I think you're going to probably find a pretty beautiful journey on the other side of it. I have plenty of friends in the same boat. pastor friends, right? Like, because it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a large load.
Yeah.
I feel grateful for the tools that we have in this season because I've not run into that need in my own personal life. Mostly because I feel like I have great tools and a great community of people that are my antidepressants for me. That when I have those feelings, like I can say I feel shame and they don't like look at me sideways. They're like, oh,
Let's compound that
let's
shame,
talk
shall we?
to me
No.
more about that. I'm curious.
Yes.
I want to know more
Yes.
about what
Yeah.
that thing
Yes.
is. So my prayer is that the church would be the most curious place on planet Earth about other people.
Wow.
That I would be curious about what's on the inside of you. That I wouldn't allow my emotional response to what you're going through to turn me off of being curious
Yeah.
about what's happening in your life.
That's really good.
So that's what I want in my relationships. I want my friends to be curious about what's happening in me. When I say something, I want them to be like,
That's interesting.
wait, tell
Yeah,
me more
yeah,
about
yeah,
that.
yeah,
like,
yeah.
that's super weird. You never talk like that.
Which,
tell me
like,
more.
Who doesn't actually want that?
Right. Everyone
Like on
wants
the
that.
outside, you might be like, I don't care what people say. I don't care
but
if
you
people
want
care
that.
about me.
Deeply, you
But like,
do.
actually, you really like would probably do nothing in life if you didn't have some concern for like how people were.
Yes. You're like, you want someone to be curious about
Yeah.
you in that way and
For sure.
someone to want to be an expert in who you are. Like, that's what you want with the Lord. That's what you want in relationships. And that kind of has to become, I think, like a goal within the context of the local church is that, hey, we don't have to be best friends with everyone, but the people that the Lord has drawn us to, like learning to become experts in loving them the way that the
Yep.
Lord loves them. And that means getting curious about why is her happy color blue and yours goes all the way down to black at some time. Why is that? Right?
Yeah.
Like that should stir curiosity in you because you're two very different people and I think that's what makes life exciting
Yeah.
and friendships never boring and it makes connections fun to be a part and I think that's something that the church is at least the Western church is learning to detox from
Yeah.
the
Come
idea
on.
that it's just me and mine.
Put your
I'm
head down,
Yeah, I'm like
do
I'm
the
really
thing.
interested in what makes you you.
Yeah.
So.
Well, I think that's good.
I think that's great.
I'll say this, and then I think we'll probably be wrapping it up. Last year, I was going through some stuff, and I was talking to you about it, Allie, and we were just standing in the front of church, and I felt myself. Bottom line is that God has been having me on a journey of intimacy and the definition of it. And I'm not talking about sexual intimacy. It's not it. I'm just talking about, because the word intimacy is not. It's not the only
Synonymous
thing.
with sex
But
only.
People's brains go there. Ooh.
no, that's not it. But like living in close, intimate relationship with people. And I felt myself like I duck out of conversations because the deeper that I go, it's like, oh, the closer I get, the easier it is for someone to hurt me. And it's really easy for me just to be like, okay, I'm in, I'm out. And I'm talking and I can feel myself kind of transitioning. And you looked at me and you said, I want to hear what you have to say. You don't have to rush. You don't have to go anywhere. I want to hear this conversation. And I about burst into tears. I was like, what is happening? Why do people love
Allie's
me
like, this is just a Sunday.
this is-
so well?
Because you're amazing, you know?
Yeah, that's another thing. Like, if you want to like bypass people's like crusty crust, just start honoring them. Just start like loving on them, like asking God like different things about them.
They just get real soft.
Yeah, and
they're
just feel
like,
like-
okay.
And then you're, and I just want to say thank you because that was a doorway. That was an invitation that God asked me. He's like, what would it be like if you weren't afraid? What would it be like if you didn't feel like you wanted to check out of a conversation every single time you were having it? And I was like, I don't even know what my life would look like. And then also being in relationship with Michelle Fairber, who is the children's pastor here, like just this constant asking and revealing of language of caring about people's emotions. And just to let you guys know, like if you feel like you need someone to talk to have someone point you to some other things, Ally's a really good person for that. She's an excellent person. She's made for that. Like God made her for that. So I'm so thankful for that. But also we'll put some other show notes, like different things, like the Connections Code stuff and like some of
Absolutely.
the books Whitney's reading. And not kidding, Cinema Therapy on YouTube.
Have you watched that?
No. It's
They
on
u-
YouTube.
They
is.
use movies to help go through therapy
that's
situations.
Such a great idea.
It's a brilliant
It's
idea.
like colors, right? Because people can access
Everybody
colors.
has
way,
access to the
yeah, they're like,
movies, yeah.
oh, it's
I love this
so
movie.
much.
Like,
oh my
it's not
gosh, I
so
love-
personal.
Yep.
You know, because people want to interact with something a little bit distant as they're getting to know that
Yo.
process.
That is,
Yep.
I need a T-shirt from those guys. Can they sponsor us? Can we like in turn
sponsor.
do this? Yeah, but thank you guys for coming to the show.
Yes.
Thank you, Allie.
Thank you
For-
guys for having me and for enduring the
Thank you.
beautiful.
Window, guys.
I'm just surprised they didn't bust through.
I
that would
really
have been
thought it
just
was
like
gonna
this
happen.
I'm a little
episode.
disappointed.
Kind of
Bummed.
disappointed, but hey, I was happy to be here. Thanks for letting me come.
So,
Hey, guys.
we love you guys. We will talk to you soon, and thanks for once again coming to Matters Over Miles. Bye.
Thanks so much for joining us on the Matters Over Miles podcast, a resource of Water Within Ministries. If you would like to be a supporter of the show, head over to water-within.com/WWM and click the donate button at the bottom of the page. All donations are tax deductible and greatly appreciated. Thanks again, and we'll see you next time.